The charitable trust came in also in an odd way. The players were fined if they did not bowl enough overs in a day. And speaking to Donald Carr again, I said this is not right, because it's not the players who decide how many overs to bowl, it's their county chairman or whatever. Because if a team wants to slow down the game to earn a point, the players just have to do what they're told, which they do. So therefore it seemed to me the whole of those funds should not go to the authorities. Some of it should go to the PCA. And Donald Carr and I agreed 50-50. And Donald asked, quite rightly, what are you going to do with your 50%? We don't want it just given back to the players. So I thought about that, and after I said, let's form a charity, the Cricketers Association Charitable Trust, put the money in there and keep it for cricketers who fall on hard financial times as they get older. And that happened. The first amount was £3,000, an accumulation of 2 or 3 years, and it gradually built up into a very substantial fund. I appointed trustees all round the country, so that as soon as we heard of someone who was in need, one of my trustees visited him to see that he really was in need, and it wasn't a confidence trick. And we helped them, and we continue to help them ever since. The amount we give them by today's standards is not exorbitant, but it's a help.
The charity itself was quite restrictive in how it could help people, which is quite right and proper. There has to be a charitable instrument, which is agreed by the Charity Commission. And therefore, it was pretty limited in what it could do. So the PCA Benevolent Fund has a wider scope to help more people. So, and also the income coming into the PCA charity was defined by the over-rate fines. That lasted for a bit in the game and then was terminated, fortunately for every bowler in the country. Whereas the Benevolent Fund is definitely supported by the fundraising activities over a number of events that the PCA organise. So it's dealing with much larger figures.
Probably one of the most important meetings I had was going back into 1998. David Graveney rang me up to tell me that Winston Davis was being flown from the West Indies to Oswestry in Shropshire. He was a tetraplegic because of an accident in St Vincent, and I went to see Winston on behalf of the PCA to see how he was. And I went to see him in Oswestry Hospital. It was very memorable. It was a very old hospital. I was walking down the corridors, walking up to his bed. I sat down, and there was the man who was in a terrible way, but smiling, very clear that he was a very religious man. And I asked him how he was, how the PCA could help, and he said he only had one problem, and that was when they delivered his breakfast, he had to wait for someone to come and serve him.
It goes without saying, the PCA has enabled me to be able to be here today because of providing me with a vehicle, an adapted vehicle that meets all my needs. Without that, I'd be stuck at home. So you can't put a price on that. Freedom of movement, ability to travel throughout the country. As a person who was active before the accident, it's my language. I like to get about. So all credit to the PCA.
And it was that particular moment I realised actually it wasn't just about the elite at the top of the game. It was about how does the family of cricketers help all of the cricketers, not just actually in England and Wales, but also all around the world. And when you look at the community of players in the 10 test playing nations, it was amazing.
It would be fair to say that at various times it was debated, why do we have two different charities and why don't we combine them together? And eventually that's now been achieved. So it's just confusing to the public, you know, that suddenly there's the Cricket Association charity, which it was to start with, changed to the PCA charity, then the PCA Benevolent Fund.
I think most people that have been involved in the PCA down the lines, and particularly in recent years, would say that being part of the Benevolent Fund was one of the most fulfilling parts of the role. it goes right to the heart of the organisation. It goes to what we're all about, which is looking after people, protecting people, and therefore the Benevolent Fund's growth, and certainly my part in it, from a day-to-day point of view, from a marketing point of view, from putting the videos together to sending out lots of information to creating the big bike ride in partnership with Tom Maynard Trust, has been pretty rewarding.
Some of the stories and the DVDs that are made are genuinely emotional and uplifting, and I think it has a good roll-on effect. It's actually the more people know about it, the more that we can identify people we can help. Pride is the biggest obstacle we have, is pride, that people feel that they shouldn't come forward and ask.
I was the type of player who was always bad at asking for help. I'd never pick the phone up and say to someone, you know what, I'm struggling a little bit here, can you help me? I think that's still a barrier that with the PCA we're trying to break down. With a Benevolent Fund especially, it is like an insurance fund for cricketers.
The PCA Benevolent Fund, that is one of the things which is the biggest difference between my time in the PCA and now. And the more money it can raise through various functions and everything else, the better it is to help players who... There are a lot of players in many sports who, once they're finished, things tend to go sideways because they've had they don't realise it at the time, they've had a fairly sheltered existence through the 20s and the 30s. So the bigger that fund can get, the better.
We understand where we are. We're not going to cure cancer, we're not going to cure heart disease, but we can make a real difference to people's lives.